It started on a brisk autumn afternoon. I was hiking a familiar trail that wound through dense woods behind my house. The air was crisp, and the leaves crunched underfoot as I moved along the path, enjoying the solitude. This was my escape, a place where the noise of the world couldn't reach me. The trail looped through several miles of untouched forest, ending at a small clearing. As I approached the clearing, I heard it, a faint sound that stopped me in my tracks. Crying. At first, I thought I was imagining it, but as I stood still, straining my ears, the sound became clearer. Soft, pitiful sobs carried on the breeze. "Hello!" I called out, my voice echoing through the trees. The crying stopped abruptly. The sudden silence sent a chill down my spine. "Is someone there?" I tried again, my pulse quickening. A faint rustling came from the clearing ahead. Cautiously, I moved toward the sound, pushing through the underbrush until I stepped into the open. That's when I saw him. A boy, no older than 6 or 7, sat on the ground in the middle of the clearing. His clothes were dirty and torn, his dark hair matted with leaves and twigs. He looked up at me with wide, tear-streaked eyes. "Hey," I said gently, crouching a few feet away. "Are you okay? Are you lost?" The boy didn't answer. He just stared at me, his gaze unervingly direct. "What's your name?" I asked, trying again. "You know it," he said softly. The word sent a jolt through me. His voice was steady, almost eerily calm, and the way he said it made my skin crawl. I don't know your name," I replied, trying to keep my tone steady. "Can you tell me where you live? I can help you find your parents." He tilted his head slightly, his expression unreadable. "You don't remember me?" The question caught me off guard. "I've never met you before," I said firmly, though doubt was creeping into my mind. The boy stood slowly, brushing dirt from his clothes. He was small, but there was something about him that felt off. Something in the way he moved, deliberate and precise, like he was older than he seemed. "I know you," he said, taking a step closer. I stood too, instinctively moving back. "How do you know me?" The boy didn't answer. Instead, he pointed toward the trees behind me. "It's getting dark. We should go." I turned to look, and sure enough, the sun was sinking lower, casting long shadows across the clearing. When I turned back, the boy was already walking toward the trail. "Wait," I called, hurrying after him. "Where are you going?" "To your house," he said simply. My stomach dropped. "How do you know where I live?" He didn't respond, and something about the way he kept moving, so confident and sure, made my skin prickle. I followed him, unsure what else to do. The forest grew darker as we walked, the trees casting shadows that stretched and twisted with the fading light. The boy didn't seem bothered, his pace steady and unhurried. "So, what's your name?" I tried again, my voice sounding small in the silence. He glanced back at me, his dark eyes glinting in the dim light. "You'll remember it soon." His cryptic answers were starting to unnerve me. I thought about calling the authorities, but there was no cell service out here, and I wasn't about to leave him alone in the woods. "Are your parents looking for you?" I asked, trying a different approach. "No," he said flatly. The way he said it made my chest tighten. I glanced around, half expecting someone to appear from the shadows, but the forest was empty. Just me and this strange, silent child. As we walked, I couldn't shake the feeling that I'd seen him before. Something about his face, his eyes. It was like a memory I couldn't quite grasp. "Have we met before?" I asked, my voice tinged with hesitation. The boy didn't answer right away. When he finally spoke, his tone was soft, almost sad. "You forgot." "Forgot what?" He didn't respond, and his silence sent a chill through me. We reached the edge of the forest just as the last light of day faded. My house stood in the distance, its windows glowing warmly against the encroaching darkness. The sight of it brought a small measure of relief. "This is your home, right?" he asked, though he didn't wait for my answer before walking toward it. By the time we reached the porch, the boy was already at the door, waiting for me to unlock it. "Hold on," I said, stepping in front of him. "Before we go inside, I need to know who you are. Do you have a phone number? Someone I can call?" He shook his head. "I don't need one. I'm already where I'm supposed to be." I frowned. What does that mean? He didn't answer. Instead, he reached out and opened the door himself, stepping inside without hesitation. Hey, wait! I called, hurrying after him. The house felt colder than it should have, the air heavy with a strange metallic scent. The boy stood in the middle of the living room, his gaze fixed on something I couldn't see. This is where it happened, he said softly. What are you talking about? I asked, my voice trembling. He turned to look at me, his dark eyes unblinking. You don't remember me, but I remember you. I've been waiting for you to come back. Come back from where? From forgetting, he said simply. My chest tightened as a wave of unease washed over me. The room felt darker, the shadows stretching unnaturally across the walls. What are you talking about? I demanded, my voice shaking. The boy didn't respond. Instead, he pointed toward the staircase. It's upstairs, he said. You'll remember when you see it. I didn't want to go upstairs. Every instinct screamed at me to leave, to run as far from this boy and his cryptic words as I could. But something about the way he stared at me, so certain, so knowing, made it impossible to refuse. With trembling hands, I grabbed the banister and began to climb. The boy followed silently, his presence a constant weight at my back. The second floor was dark, the hallway stretching out like a tunnel into the unknown. My heart pounded as I moved toward the door at the end of the hall, the one I hadn't opened in years. When I reached it, I hesitated. My hand hovered over the doorknob, my breath coming in short, shallow gasps. Open it, the boy said from behind me. I turned to look at him, my voice trembling. What's in there? You'll see, he said simply. Taking a deep breath, I turned the knob and pushed the door open. The door creaked open, revealing a room bathed in shadows. Dust hung in the air, thick and undisturbed, illuminated only by the faint glow of the hallway light behind me. It took me a moment to recognize it. The furniture, the faded wallpaper, the old wooden floor, it all felt familiar, but in a way that made my stomach churn. This was my brother's room, I whispered. The words left my mouth before I could think about them, and as soon as I said them, a wave of memories began to surface. I hadn't stepped foot in this room in years, not since the accident. You remember now? The boy said softly, stepping into the room behind me. I turned to him, my pulse quickening. How do you know about this? He didn't answer. Instead, he walked to the center of the room, his small figure looking oddly at home amidst the dust and decay. This is where it started, he said, his voice distant. This is where you left me. My mind reeled. I didn't leave anyone, I said, my voice trembling. I don't even know you. The boy turned to face me, his expression calm but unyielding. You do. You just don't want to remember. I stared at him, the weight of his words sinking into my chest like a stone. Images began to flicker at the edges of my memory, fragmented and distorted like an old film reel. Laughter, a child's voice, the sound of running feet on the wooden floor, and then the crash. No, I said, shaking my head. That's not possible. The boy tilted his head, his dark eyes piercing. Do you remember my name now? I opened my mouth to respond, but the name caught in my throat. I didn't want to say it. I didn't want it to be true. The memories came flooding back, unbidden and relentless. The boy running down the stairs, his laughter echoing through the house. Me chasing after him, shouting for him to stop. The way he tripped, the way his body tumbled down the steps, and the silence that followed. No, I whispered, backing away. You're not him. You can't be. I am, he said simply. And I've been waiting for you. Tears blurred my vision as I pressed myself against the wall. You're lying. You're not real. You're just some lost kid I found in the woods. The boy stepped closer, his gaze unwavering. You found me because I wanted to be found, because I needed you to remember. I sank to the floor, my chest heaving with sobs. I'm sorry, I choked out. I didn't mean for it to happen. I didn't mean to. You forgot me, he said, his voice sharper now. You locked this room and pretended it never happened. But I never left. The air in the room grew colder, and the shadows seemed to ripple and shift, creeping closer to where I sat. The boy stood in the center of it all, his small figure eerily still. "I've been here the whole time," he said, "waiting for you to come back, waiting for you to face what you did." The shadows stretched toward me, dark tendrils that seemed to hum with a quiet, malevolent energy. My body felt heavy, pinned in place by the weight of my guilt. "What do you want from me?" I whispered, my voice barely audible. "I want you to remember," he said. "All of it." The shadows closed in, enveloping me in darkness. I couldn't see the room anymore, couldn't feel the floor beneath me. All that remained were the memories, vivid and unrelenting. I saw the boy again, my brother Sam. I saw the way he smiled, the way he laughed, the way he always looked up to me. And I saw the accident, replaying in excruciating detail. I remembered holding him at the bottom of the stairs, his small body limp in my arms. I remembered calling for help, the panic and despair that consumed me as the realization set in. And I remembered the funeral, the way everyone looked at me with pity and sadness. Most of all, I remembered the guilt, the crushing, suffocating guilt that had followed me every day since. "I didn't mean to forget you," I whispered into the darkness. "I didn't mean to leave you." The shadows seemed to pause, the oppressive weight lifting slightly. "Do you mean that?" the boy asked, his voice softer now. "Yes," I said, tears streaming down my face. "I'm so sorry, Sam. I should have been there for you. I should have." The words caught in my throat as the darkness began to recede, the room slowly coming back into focus. The boy, Sam, stood before me, his expression unreadable. For the first time, I noticed how tired he looked, as though carrying the weight of my guilt had worn him down too. "I forgive you," he said quietly. The words hit me like a punch to the chest, knocking the air from my lungs. "But you have to let me go now," he continued. "You can't keep me here anymore." I nodded, my throat tight. "I will," I promised. "I'll let you go." Sam smiled, a small, fleeting smile that reminded me of the boy he used to be. And then, slowly, he began to fade, his form dissolving into the shadows. When the room was silent again, I stood shakily, my legs weak beneath me. The air felt lighter now, the oppressive energy gone. I looked around at the dusty furniture, the faded wallpaper, the empty space where Sam had stood. For the first time in years, I felt like I could breathe. The room felt emptier than ever. I stood in the middle of it, surrounded by the faint traces of a life I had tried so hard to forget. The small bed with its faded blue quilt, the bookshelf filled with dusty toys and children's books, the framed picture on the wall of Sam and me at the lake. Everything was exactly as I'd left it that day, the day I closed the door and promised myself I'd never come back. But Sam was gone now, and for the first time in years, I felt the weight of his absence in a way I hadn't before. My chest ached, but it wasn't the crushing guilt that had haunted me for so long. It was something gentler, quieter, a longing maybe, or a regret that I had spent so much time running from my pain instead of facing it. I reached out and touched the picture frame on the wall, my fingers brushing the glass. "I'm sorry," I whispered again, my voice breaking. "I'm so sorry, Sam." The house was silent, but for the first time, it didn't feel suffocating. I spent the rest of the night sitting on the edge of Sam's bed, letting the memories wash over me. I thought of the times we spent building forts in the living room, the way he begged me to read him one more story before bed, the way he'd laugh when I tickled him. I stayed until the first light of dawn crept through the windows, casting long shadows across the floor. When I finally left the room, I closed the door gently behind me, not to shut him out this time, but to give him peace. I thought that would be the end of it, but when I stepped in the hallway, I noticed something strange. The shadows on the walls weren't moving with the light. I froze, my heart pounding. The sunlight poured in through the windows, but the shadows clung stubbornly to the walls, unnaturally dark and still. One of them shifted. I stumbled back, my breath catching in my throat. The shadow peeled itself from the wall, its form vague and amorphous, but undeniably there. What is this?" I whispered, my voice trembling. The shadow didn't respond, but it began to move, sliding along the wall like smoke. It wasn't random. It was deliberate, purposeful, and it was heading toward Sam's room. "No," I said, stepping forward. Leave him alone. He's gone. You can't have him. The shadow paused at the door, its form rippling like water. Then slowly it turned toward me. A voice echoed in the hallway, soft and distant, like a whisper carried on the wind. He's not the one we want. The air grew colder, and the house seemed to darken, the sunlight dimming as if something was leaching the warmth and light from the space. Who are you? I demanded, though my voice shook. What do you want? The shadow moved closer, its form stretching and twisting unnaturally. We were drawn to you, the voice said. Your guilt, your fear, your pain. You called to us, and we answered. My chest tightened and I took a step back. I didn't call you. I didn't ask for this. But you did, the voice replied. Every sleepless night, every tear shed, every moment spent drowning in regret. You opened the door to us, and now we're here. I shook my head, my pulse racing. I let Sam go. I faced what I did. You don't belong here anymore. The shadow laughed, a low, chilling sound that sent shivers down my spine. This isn't about him. It's about you. And we're not leaving. I backed into the living room, the shadow following me like a creeping tide. My mind raced, desperate for a solution. If these things were feeding on my pain, then maybe I could cut off their source. You don't have power over me anymore, I said, trying to sound braver than I felt. I've let go of my guilt. You have nothing to hold on to. The shadow hesitated, its form flickering slightly. For a moment, I thought it might retreat, but then it surged forward faster than I could react. The cold slammed into me like a wave, and I fell to my knees, gasping for air. The voice was louder now, filling my head with a cacophony of whispers. You can't escape us. We are a part of you. We will always be a part of you. No, I gasped, struggling to push the shadow away. You're wrong. You're just a memory. You're not real. The whispers faltered, and the shadow rippled again. I forced myself to stand, my legs shaking. You're not real, I repeated, louder this time. You're just a manifestation of my guilt, and I don't need you anymore. Sam forgave me, and I forgive myself. The shadows began to recede, their forms unraveling like smoke caught in the wind. When the last shadow disappeared, the house grew warm again. The light returned, soft and golden, filling the space with a quiet peace I hadn't felt in years. I sank onto the couch, exhausted but relieved. For the first time since Sam's death, the house didn't feel like a prison. I sat there for a long time, staring at the closed door of Sam's room. Thank you, I whispered, hoping he could hear me, wherever he was. The house felt lighter in the days that followed. The oppressive weight of the past, the guilt I'd carried for so long, seemed to have lifted. But there was still an emptiness, a lingering ache where Sam's presence had been. I found myself spending more time in his room, tidying up the dust and sorting through the things he had left behind. It was painful, but it was also healing. Each object, a toy car, a book with his name scribbled on the inside cover, brought back memories. But there was something else in the room too, a sense of peace, as though Sam had truly forgiven me. One evening, as the sun dipped below the horizon, I was sitting in the living room when I heard it again. A knock at the door. Knock, knock, knock. The sound sent a shiver down my spine. For a moment, I sat frozen, my heart pounding. Memories of that first knock flooded back. The way I'd found Sam in the woods, the shadows that had followed. But this time, something felt different. The knock wasn't insistent or foreboding. It was soft, almost hesitant. I stood, my steps slow and cautious as I approached the door. When I opened it, I found nothing but the empty street, bathed in the golden glow of the setting sun. Then I looked down. A small, black feather lay on the doorstep. Beside it was a folded piece of paper. With trembling hands, I picked up the paper and unfolded it. The handwriting was small and neat, unfamiliar, but comforting in a way I couldn't explain. Thank you for remembering me. I'm okay now. You don't have to be sad anymore. I'll always be with you. The words blurred as tears filled my eyes. I clutched the note to my chest, my heart swelling with both grief and gratitude. Sam was gone, But he wasn't lost, and neither was I. That night, I sat on the porch, the letter and feather in my lap. The stars were bright above, and the air was cool and still. For the first time in years, I felt like I could breathe. I didn't know what had drawn Sam back to me, or what the shadows had truly been. Maybe they were manifestations of my guilt, or maybe they were something else entirely. But it didn't matter anymore. Sam had found peace, and so had I. As I sat there, staring up at the stars, I whispered a quiet goodbye. And in the silence that followed, I thought I heard his laughter, soft and fleeting, carried on the wind.